of the way.
Okay. All right, so maybe we can do a few walkthroughs too. Did you want to talk about garden design like you did the last time and use um, the same slides?
I forget what I went over last time. I don't have any slides this time.
Okay. Well, you went over garden design as like how you're incorporating that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and open the room. You okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. I'll admit everyone. 4 people. Hello, hello everyone. Rachel. Yay, we have Andrea Zabel.
Hi.
Vivian, how are you? Good evening.
Good afternoon or morning. May I finish my dinner and after I will share my
Yes.
video again? Sorry.
Yeah. Finish your dinner for sure. And welcome Vivian and welcome Jeremy.
Thank you.
And Rachel. Thanks for joining us today. Jeremy, tell us if you can in the chat, or I'm not sure if you can unmute where you are calling us from, and also if, yeah, a little bit of your background. We would love to hear more about what brings you to Sage.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Actually, I met you guys down at the Aries, the show there, held by Mother Earth News. It was great. So I first learned of Sage there, and I'm actually just getting started trying it out kind of as a beta tester. So I'm really interested in seeing where you guys go with this.
Yes. And Jeremy does this beta testing, software testing for a living. Am I right, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's right. I do.
Yeah.
I do that.
Okay.
More like customer support, but we get a lot of bugs and things. And so,
oh, wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. All right. So Dave, I'll give the floor to you and I'll mute myself and let me know if you need anything from me.
Yeah, so normally with these sessions, I like to do a little bit of a demo and then do a little bit of brainstorming and tie it in with some practical, garden design. So in the past, we've done guilds and using the tools for that, and just planning out the seasons in terms of the planting calendar. I've been busy at work with this designer, which is a 2-dimensional overhead view where you can place your plants. And I had a tool a couple of years ago that I was basically taking this tool and integrating it with the current software so that everything would you'd be able to share the same data and have different views of the data. So that process is going a little slower than I expected. So the demo part of it will be pretty short. It's more like a status update. Just to I think it's pretty close now. It's just there were a lot of this older tool had been the designer had been written in a older framework, and moving that is always a kind of a technical pain. So I think I've got past most of the technical parts, and then so now it's mostly just look and feel and making things start to make sense. So I think probably what I'll just do to get everybody on the same page again before we can structure this session, where I'll do a quick overview of the different parts of Sage and then show you just the status of what I'm working on right now. And then I'd love to hear brainstorming input about how you normally, your process of how you figure out or design what plants are going to be in your garden. the next year. Okay, so let me just bring it up.
And I know we've had some feedback that sometimes you have particular questions that apply to you and your experience of Sage, and that we never get to them at the end. So if you do have those questions, put it in the chat that how does this work, or a particular section in Sage that you're confused with, so that Dave can deal with them in this call, or if not, we can follow up.
Okay, so I'll just log out quickly. When you first come to Sage, there's a login page. There's a default password that we've given everybody to log in. You can change your password after you log in now, so you don't have to do this forget your password. The forgot your password is kind of slightly painful because it's a two-step process where you have to get a verification code in your email and then use that verification code in order to reset your password. So it's probably easier once you log in. If you go up to the upper right here, you can change your password, and that's generally a lot easier. There's a tab I'm going to be adding here called settings. So it'll have things that are relevant to your experience. So things like if you wanted to see things in metric or imperial units, or your default zip code or default location, just so that these are kind of like preferences that you would use across the site. So I think by next time I'll have some of those things implemented, and there'll be an extra thing here like preferences or settings. So the first, basically Sage consists of four, well, it will ultimately consist of 4 different tools that are integrated in a holistic fashion and deal with different aspects of how you do garden design. So one is very straightforward, it's the planting calendar. And it's just it kind of serves 2 functions. One is just to get an idea of upcoming events, like almost like a traditional calendar where you can see things that are coming up specifically for your garden tasks. And then more interestingly, you can also get notifications by text or email for upcoming events. So there's other parts of the application that allow you to generate planting dates. And then what we found is this tool has been in there the longest, probably about a year now, and we found that it's most useful for getting alerts about, oh, I should start this seed now a couple days ahead, so that okay, if I want to meet my planting dates, so that I get the plants in there into my garden in a timely fashion, I should start these things now. You could also do, when you create events, you can also do things like if you had a project, construction, you're making raised beds. But I feel like that's not quite there yet. So that requires a little more thought about how you would structure all the different tasks. I didn't want to create another ClickUp or Trello or whatever. So I think for now, this is pretty much what the planting calendar does. There is a My Plants area. So this actually has a lot already implemented in it, but we're trying to figure out now the kind of work. Andrea, did you have a question?
Yeah, the calendar. I noticed that in one page, the calendar has this color coding. I mean, just green, orange, red. Would it be possible to add to the top of the screen that which color means what?
Oh, you mean like a index?
Yeah, like an index, yeah.
Yeah. I think that would be pretty easy to add.
Thank you.
And maybe also like some kind of, so yeah, if you added a transplanting. That it colors it, yeah.
Or just enter that what it is.
Yeah, well, I think just having a index or guide there is, because what happens is we didn't want to take up real estate with the category. So what happens is if you put the category, it tends to push the actual title. So if you're just looking at this, you can shrink this so that you get a slightly bigger view, but I think just having some code there, some table to indicate what the colors are is probably pretty helpful. Okay, so going back to my plants, so this is really kind of like your plant data central. You're looking at the information about your plants, and then there's different ways of looking at that. So we tried to break it down so that to organize the way that you're looking at your plants by dividing your garden into different areas, physical locations in your garden. So you create an area. So for example, I have a kitchen garden here and I have a raised bed. And then you have different plants within that area. You can capture those, and the way it's represented changes based off the different views that you want to look at that plant data. So it's all the same plant data, it's just different ways of thinking about how you would design your garden based off those different views. So the first one is the time space view. So what you're looking at when you're thinking about the plants in your garden, you're thinking about how much space you have in that area that's available for plants. And then also the kind of yields that you're trying to expecting to get from that. So in this view, and this is really the main view where you're going to be looking at seasonal. You can use the seasonal tabs for the other views as well. But what you're going to have is a number of plants. You can add a new plant here, and I'll cover the crop planner in a minute to talk about other ways of populating plants into your garden areas. If you want to edit the plant information, you just click on the little cards that are associated with that plant. So you can kind of think of it like it's a card view of all the plants in your area. And you click on it, it pops up this dialog with the most important information is at the top, but there's a lot of data associated with each plant. So these are kind of like an accordion style way to hide all the other information. So all of this data you can edit by clicking on an individual data item and editing it in line. And this doesn't change when you create a plant. There's a template in our database for that species, for like Napa cabbage, Asian cabbage, that gives you a bunch of defaults. These are averages. And then you can customize whatever I just changed. Didn't change that template, it changed that specific plant in that area. So you can update a lot of this information to be specifically for your garden. If you had microclimates or a specific variety, that might have different values. All of these things are used together to kind of figure out the space that the number of plants will take up in your garden. So you can kind of see in the background, it says the space used in square feet. If I change the number of plants now to like 20, then that value changes. So these things are kind of related, and you can kind of play around with them to get a feeling for what you have space for in your garden, as well as the amount of harvest that you would get total from potentially from those plants. There are planting dates here. By default, they're not populated. There's estimated and actual. Estimated is kind of like the dates that are generated by a planting calendar. If you looked at and figured out, okay, I should be starting it on these dates. And then actual is just to track what really happened. It may not be so relevant for the seed starting date and the transplant date, but for the harvest date, it's useful because one of the intents for SAGE is to collect all this data over a year. And then you would use those actual harvest dates to get a more accurate feeling for how long it really takes for Asian cabbage, for example, to be harvested in your garden. So the idea is most of the information out there is very generic, and we're going to try to generate collect enough data from our observations that we can use that to be kind of more efficient for the following year. You have an ability, this is kind of like a harvest log. So you can, as you get harvests, you can store this. This is going to feed eventually into another big portion of the, once I get the designer done, the last part of the SAGE tool will be an observations page where you can review your photos and your notes and your harvests and try to data crunch all of that so that you get some insight into some of the patterns that are happening in your garden and recommendations, ideally about some things that you could do in the future. And then the notes is going to be more like a note log that feeds into the observations. So that part isn't really implemented right now. So this view, if you populate the dates, put in some dummy dates there. Then you'll get I'm gonna have to reload to get this. You start getting timelines. So not only will you get kind of information about the space that's taken up, but as you generate planting dates for the plants in that area, they'll start being populated here. So you can kind of get like a timeline view of the plants in that area. You can also specify the seasons for seasonality. So for example, if I wanted to grow this in the fall, and I wanted to grow asparagus, summer, yarrow might not have a season, and arnica doesn't really have a season. This gives you a way to kind of see like, okay, in the spring I got nothing growing in this area. In the summer I have asparagus. In the fall I have cabbage. So you can view things seasonally and go back to seeing the kind of non-filtered view of everything. So this is the kind of a more traditional view of looking at your plants in terms of time and space. But we also we have a couple other people next. Are you muted?
Tanisha's in.
Okay.
At
Well,
least I think that's Tanisha. I'm just guessing.
you can also get rid of your plants if you want to remove them, and you can use this to add plants. So you don't have to put in a lot of basic information to get to the plant. And then I wanted to just talk quickly about the different views in the My Plants area. So plant family. So we've talked about this a little bit in our webinars about when most of the food that we consume falls into a few major plant families. And I think I'll add two more here to cover herbs. So the Asteraceae and Lamiaceae those cover most of your culinary herbs and quite a lot of your edible flower type things. So and your pollinators and things like that. So those 9 plant families, you'll find that most of your things that you grow, vegetables and in your garden, fall into those. And there's a tendency to not really recognize the family that the vegetable that you want to grow falls into, because then we have a tendency to like grow the same thing, the same plant family over and over again. Brassica is a perfect example that includes things like cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, daikon radish. And what happens is that we're trying to get a diversity of different plant families in a specific area, because what happens is if you just grow the same plant, then for any wandering pest that's flying over your garden, quite a lot of them are attracted by scent, and when they get that very strong scent reinforcement from a whole large area that's just planted with the same plant family, then they're going to immediately want to move in, because this is like paradise for them. So one of the things that we're just trying to do so that we get more resiliency in our gardens, so we're always kind of guaranteed some kind of harvest, is to get a diversity of plantings in each garden area. So this is just another view of the same plant, same data, but we're looking at it from a different perspective. And then finally, we have guild function. So in permaculture, there's not just what's known as companion planting, but if you think of each garden area as kind of like a mini ecology, so plants tend to be more supportive than they are competing. So they might compete for sunshine, but generally they don't compete as much for nutrients. They're or root space. There's especially if we're thinking about complementary roles. So plants in nature, if you're not just planting the same plant, they will tend to complement each other. So they'll fulfill these functional niches in that space in nature. So what we're trying to do is recreate that in our garden area. This is another view, same garden area, the same plants, but we're looking at it from another perspective. So traditionally in permaculture, you have these things called guilds. You also have food forest layer. So a guild is kind of like a grouping of plants that are designed to fulfill, so that every plant has kind of a primary or functional role that it plays in that guild. So you might have a star player that is an apple tree, and then you have things that support that apple tree. So you're looking to get most of your harvest from that apple tree, but you need to attract bees to pollinate that. You want to have kind of insectary plants that attract beneficial insects that will prey on the pest insects. You want to keep the soil covered. around that apple tree, you ideally want to be, there are some plants that fix nitrogen from the atmosphere into the soil in a more stable format than adding fertilizer. So there's all these different roles that you're trying to fulfill. What we're trying to do separately is collect a comprehensive database of about 400 to 500 perennials and annuals with this kind of information, because historically a lot of people have been taught this, and then it's kind of like, okay, you know the theory, go out there and have fun, and then it's kind of like, okay, what do we do now? So right now we only have 3 plants or something like that have all this information in there, but we're going to gradually build this database of information where you can search and say, okay, I'm in a tropical climate and it's cold and I'm looking for this kind of layer. You know, what can I grow? Right now there might not be anything for that, but I'll do temperate there. So then you can add these things into this little tool, this view, and you can drag them around. In some cases, these plants might have multiple functions that they can play. So I have the ability in this tool to be able to drag those around to the different functional roles in the guild. On the right here is the layers in your garden. So we're kind of thinking like growing 3-dimensionally. So that's another way to kind of multiply your outputs, is instead of just growing one thing in vertical space, in nature there's lots of plants that fill different niches in the vertical dimension. So having an idea, it's kind of like a game. You're trying to fill out all the roles so that you have something filling out all the roles, but you're also ideally trying to get at least 3 or 4 layers vertically in the same area as well, so that you're making maximum usage of your vertical space as well. And those things don't tend to change. So you can't drag a ground cover to a canopy tree, for example, but you can drag around functions.
Dave, I think Vivian has a question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Go ahead, Vivian.
My question was, does a plant have a default function, or do we add that? And if we add that, then where would we do that?
So it has a default function in the template. I think that that information might not be show up on the card yet. Okay. But if I just search for, you can see here generally echinacea is herbaceous. It prefers USDA zones 4 to 9 in a temperate climate, and its main functions are pollinator. But you can see Anishisop can be both a pollinator and an insectary plant. There's little summaries here. It might be useful to also have some kind of pop-up here. Right now, you can't get any kind of additional information once you've added something, but it might be useful just to get a pop-up here where you get some of that information as well.
And does that also hold true then, because it has then, whether it's a ground cover or a root crop or whatever,
Yes,
your database has both of those associated with the guild element.
So if I add this here, it's going to pick the primary function. So it would be, if I wanted to use this as an insectary plant, you just kind of have to do a 2-step process. Now you'd have to add this, and then you see that added it as a pollinator. and then I'd have to drag it to insectary. And that would make that version of the anise hyssop that's in this garden area insectary. But its guild function is that it's insectary. So it's still just using the template, and then it overwrites that information. The only thing is, I think when you go back to this card now and click anise hyssop, and then there's a bug, it's not showing. Okay, so yeah, when this pops up, you should be able to edit and see that information about the guilds and things like that. I think that right now that's not working right now. So, but that should be information that then you can customize.
Thank you.
I think Andrea also has an idea.
Yeah, sorry, it's not necessary to, not mandatory to accept my ideas. So just have to, what can we do if there are any pests in the garden, just to add some organic way to sorry, I do not know this kind of words in English.
Oh, it's perfect. I know what you're saying because I'm reading your garden notes in your in your Notion document. So yeah, the notes on on diseases, right?
Yeah,
Where would we
yeah.
where would we put that under notes, Dave?
Yeah, I think that's almost like a separate category of information. So it's like there's notes associated with so that it could be diseases. It could be part of the template for the plants in that database. These are the primary pests of that plant. You know, like for brassicas, you have cabbage loopers and harlequin bugs, and there's probably a list there. So that people can say, okay, I would love to grow broccoli, but I'm scared because the last time I tried it, there was this bug that it attacked. So can I get some, not just information about the primary pest, but also what are some of the standard ways of dealing with that? So I think probably the best way to do that is to have a list of all the pests and diseases, and then you can then correlate that. So some diseases affect more than one type of plant. And then you have those relationships between the diseases and pests, collecting that information, and then connecting that over to the plants and saying, okay, these plants suffer from these pests and diseases. I don't know if that makes sense or.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think this is at least my biggest pain point when I started gardening. And yeah, okay, there's an internet, I can search, but yeah.
No, yeah, I just a lot as we're planning to do with the perennials, I'd love to be able to collect all that information too, like not just whatever the standard way is to deal with the pest, but what actually worked, you know, like connecting people's actual observations with some of that data about the diseases and pests.
I think actually that'll be one of the most important parts of this in terms of like gathering, crowdsourcing the data from people, because the forums on one disease are just like super long for one plant, and then just organizing that, I think it would be great.
And
Yeah.
pests are not just insects, they're also mammals
Yes.
and birds. So you
And
know,
viruses and I
Yeah.
don't know.
And protists.
Yeah. So yeah, I know it's an endless list. So you need to have a limit that, okay, I do this, but no more. I understand it.
I think that's probably something that we'll start to think about more when we hit the observations. So right now I'm kind of wrapping up the designer. And then I'd say in about a month, I'll start looking more at the kind of data crunching. And I think at that point, just thinking about where it's natural to fit that information into the interface, you know, like, does it make sense when you're looking at this view that or, you know, where would that kind of make more sense to link to that information?
I would add it totally separately because it's impossible to add it to all plants. It would be huge. Just add in a separate tab that like under planting calendar, that common diseases or something like this. At least the 10 most common.
And it also varies by area. There's some diseases that are more prevalent in a specific area. So I think there has to be some kind of climate information there as well, because like we get a lot of pests that probably aren't present somewhere else.
So
Lots of fun, lots of different dimensions of data.
yeah.
So, any question? Oh, I forgot.
Rachel has a question, Dave.
Rachel, go ahead.
Sure. I was looking at like the timeline as far as it shows planting and harvest and all of that. Is this something where you can save the data by year or by season so you can compare, like go back and look at?
Yeah, so we've had that question before. It's not implemented right now, but one of the things we're definitely going to add is the year that you're working on, so that you can compare with previous years. I don't want it to be just like a tool for now. I think the real value of this tool is being able to look in the past. So being able to segregate by year, you pick 2023 and then next year it'd be 2024, but then you can go back to 2023.
Absolutely. That'd be super helpful. Especially if you start tracking differences and, I planted this many weeks earlier or later, what
I've already found that useful, like in 2016, or maybe it might be 2015, I started creating a Google spreadsheet of my harvests throughout the year. So I might be a little too OCD about this, but I would weigh the stuff as we harvested it. And it's really fascinating now, just looking back over the last 6-7 years and seeing, oh, in this month, I've never managed to really get any kind of harvest. And it always seems to like be a trickle until suddenly in the middle of the summer or something, I get all of this harvest. So I wouldn't have that kind of insight without being able to look back at all that data that I collected. Was there anything else before I go to some of the other parts?
So I do have a question. So just to clarify, the 4 parts that you are mainly the core of Sage are my plants, the planting calendar, the designer, and observations. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have this tool called Crop Planner, but it fits more under the designer. So
Okay.
when the designer is in place, that's kind of like a wizard tool for the designer. Okay, so very quickly, just wanted to show this Crop Planner tool. This is kind of like a wizard tool to help you get started in terms of thinking about planting dates and for your climate. So it's kind of like a 4-step wizard. In the first step, you can enter in your zip code. If you don't live in the United States or you don't have a zip code, then you can load the data. It's based off average minimum and monthly maximum temperatures for your climate by month. So there's 24 data points there.
And it was hard to translate or change to Fahrenheit from Celsius.
Yeah, this is again from
Sorry, I am in Europe.
I know. We have a list of things in our backlog that from 2 months ago. I haven't dealt with that yet, but yeah, having a conversion, so you pick what
Conversion. Yeah, this is
preference.
what I wanted. Yeah, but I was so happy that I found this information on the meteorology website of the Hungarian government.
So once you have your, if you did have a zip code, then it would find the closest weather station. And then the second step is to select your plants. So it's you kind of, we recommend when, especially for beginning gardeners who they want to grow their own food, but they've never done anything before, that it's good to think about the food that your family consumes and start with that, because you don't want to grow things that you're never going to eat and you're just going to have to compost. So it's translating that list of things that you eat. So for example, quite often we get confusion about the number of plants that people need to grow in order to get the kind of harvests that can feed their family. So for example, bush beans, let's say you want to get a pound a week for your family of bush beans, then you'll need 19 plants for this planting window. So it's taking your climate. So this is the third step. It gives you a lot of useful information based off those maximum and minimum average temperatures to figure out a planting window for your climate for that plant. This isn't perfect. It doesn't take into account things like extending your climate or microclimates. It also doesn't, it's doing succession planting behind the scenes, but it's not very transparent information. So for example, if you grow carrots, which can be grown year round in a number of climates, you might get some crazy number like 400 or 500 plants. And it doesn't mean you're growing them all at the same time. It means that it staggers it. So this needs a little bit of work in terms of explaining the succession planting, but it's a good start just to get some information about planting windows and the number of plants that you would need. So that to get a pound per week, that means that during this planting window, you'd be able to get 14 weeks of harvest, 1 pound a week. And then finally, in the fourth step of this, you can sync that information. So I can create those events in the planting calendar automatically. And I can also create the plant with that associated information, the number of plants, the 19 plants in the garden areas in the My Plants. So if I wanted to do that, I would just select the plant that I want to sync. And then I can click that. And if I go to My Plants now, I have the beans here. So that's what's currently up there. Oh, there's also a kind of a spreadsheet view. It's kind of minimal right now, but some people, instead of looking at information by area, this is kind of like all the data in one place. There's no way to possibly show all the different columns of data. So we're going to add a thing where you can select the columns you want to view and then be able to sort by that information. So this is kind of like a behind the scenes power user view. If you wanted to look at that, look at all the data in a kind of a different format.
Vivian says helpful in this third step would be to list the days between succession planting that the program uses.
Yes, I think I would provide a succession plan, you know, like what are the waves of planting? So the different dates, probably, yeah, there'll be like a little tab that's specifically for succession. So that what I'm working on.
Sorry, Dave. Would you please go back to the previous screen? I think there's a bug there. Yeah, here, plant family. It should not be a number or.
Oh yes, definitely not. This looks like days to harvest. It looks like it got shifted over. So if you find bugs, and there will be many bugs to find at this stage of the development, we've set up a Zyro form. Maybe Nick, you can post that in the chat. So we're trying to collect all these bugs as much as possible, just so we can sort through them. And I can imagine at this point, there's probably dozens of them, if not hundreds of them. And then gradually we'll kind of winnow that down. Like, I don't know what that 0 is there. So in this tab, I have, this is kind of my test environment. So this is over here. This is the designer. It's going to be a 2-dimensional 2D overhead view of your garden. So it's the same plants, and ideally we're going to have the same, it's all the same information that you saw in the My Plants or in the planting calendar. It's just it's a spatial view of that same data. It's a little bit, the reason why I haven't released this, and this is still in the test environment, is there's an older, you can kind of see there's an older looking feel that I'm replacing. So there's a button panel on the right that I'm just getting rid of and replacing with React controls. So as soon as I get that done, then I'll be putting that in so it's live and everybody can start playing around with it. So the general idea, before I talk about the layers, is that you have a design, and you can draw your beds, and then you can put your plants in the beds. And this is very a trivialization. There's a lot of steps that will have to be added to this. One of the things is if you have 19 pea plants, you don't want to be putting this right now. There's no relative size. You don't want to be putting 19 pea plants. So there'll be a way to be able to apply groups of plants or patches as you're adding these plants. You'll be able to search for plants, and here again you can see the formatting of the original tool is awkward. That's why I'm going to be moving it over to using that right hand control. But I could search for sweet potato. No, that didn't show up. Echinacea. The search is still a little bit squirrely. I'm not showing up. It was showing up before. So what there should be here is a set of things that you can add. You search for your plants. It's from the same database that the My Plants is, and then you'll be able to add the plants by clicking. So this was working earlier, but when you do the search, you would select the plant you want to add from your search, and then you can place instances of it by clicking here. And then you can select this and move things around. And then there's also a seasonal slider that's not currently working, was working before, where you can play through the year and see for that spatial location the seasonal rotation of your plants. So that there's a lot of things that I've been working on, just moving that over to using Sage. So that's why I'm just working through those bugs, and it's been a little slower. I wanted to just explain a little bit quickly about these different layers. So the philosophy that I don't know if anybody's ever used Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop, or a tool like that. They have this idea of layers. So if you think about your garden from a top-down kind of view, the first layer is the contours of your property, the grass, and being able to maybe put in like a Google Earth imagery or something like that. The second layer is the houses and buildings and pathways and sheds and fences and things like that. They're not really associated specifically with your plants, but they're important because visually you want to see how all these human elements interact with your garden elements. So these things, I wanted to separate them into different tools for different layers. So you can only work on a single layer at a time, but you can view multiple layers, kind of like your layers of an onion. You can see all of them at the same time, but you can also, if it gets too cluttered, then you could hide the visibility of some of those different layers. But critically, you can only edit one layer at a time. The third layer is the areas that we talked about. So in order to view the information from the My Plants, and if anybody has any suggestions on this as well, you would want to draw an area, and then any plant that you're placing in that area would automatically be added to the My Plants areas, instead of having to individually say for each plant that I have to associate it with this area. So it's just a tool to be able to draw general boundaries on your garden so that the tool will automatically categorize the plants that you place in the designer into that area. The borders is then the raised beds in your garden. So like if I wanted to draw this tool, I'm going to also improve so that you'll be able to see the actual location of the points as you place them and move them around. So but the idea is that the borders are all these edges to your garden beds. And then finally, the plants area is where you interact with your plants. So you'll be able to see information about starting dates, etc., in this view as well. It just won't be as comprehensive as the My Plants view. This is still a little rough, but I think in 2 weeks, it'll be functional enough that I'll be able to make it live and have the implementation of the layers, as well as these tools working somewhat reliably.
We have some questions from Vivian. Thank you, Dave. We have some questions from Vivian and Andrea. Vivian, do you want to go?
So my understanding is then you could choose one of two. Well, you could choose several paths in order to populate your area with your plants. You could go through the planting, not the plant, the crop planner. You could go through the crop planner and say, this is the vegetable I want, and this is how much I want, and then you would put it in your area. That would be one way. The other way would be to start to take the designer and select what plants you want to put where, and then that would add it to your area in the other view. Am I correct in what I'm saying here?
Yeah, exactly. So
you wouldn't want to do both. You wouldn't want to go through your crop planner that wizard tool and put stuff in your area, and then come into your designer and almost like putting a duplicate in your area too.
Yeah, so when I started thinking about the crop planner, my idea was eventually with the design, once it's basically functional, I'd like to be able to add recommendations. So you could say, I know this is the list of plants that I want to add to this spatial area. Give me a recommend, and I've indicated where north is and west is and what the the sunshine and things like that. Give me a quick layout of my plant bed that I can then move around and fiddle with. And that's kind of where the crop planner came out of that. Is I thought, okay, well, the designer isn't ready yet. I need some tool to be able to generate this information so I can start to think about that. So
I would love a recommendation. So that would be great.
so I didn't already, yeah, I think generally you probably would use the designer or the crop planner. You wouldn't use both. But then I wanted to go back and forth between the other parts of it, the observation, the calendar, and my plants. So you're just looking at these things in different perspectives. Jeremy had asked, is there a visible grid layer and how does the view zoom? So in the original tool, there were both of those things. The grid layer would just be a grid that you could toggle. Right now, let's see if I. Right now, it's just showing the 10 feet, the 20 feet, but there is support in there. It's just I haven't moved that over yet for showing grid lines so that you can, and I think it might be useful to also enable some kind of hover on the cursor so that you can see where you are, where the cursor is pointing in terms of the actual grid location. And then zooming, the one nice thing about this library is that you can zoom. It just isn't enabled either. So those two things will be part of the things that I move over in the next 2 weeks.
Sorry that you hear my typing. I'm so sorry. Thank you. I wanted to also go back to Andrea's questions about harvest. How can she log her harvest? Like, what's the best way? And we talked about this the last time with Vivian. Once you have the plant in your space, the My Plants view can show you how much space you have left to plant, right? Or was there, but Vivian also asked for like, how much space do you need? Or was there any variation to that?
The way that that's labeled so that it's a little more intuitive. So it's almost like if you use up more space than you have, there should be something like a red font or something that indicates that you're over.
That's right. I did not lock that down the last time. Thank you.
Andrea had asked the question, does it calculate how much space needed for a tomato? Yeah, so it looks at
you answered it, yeah.
So a lot of these are defaults. I've tried to populate that, but you might say, for your variety of tomato, it's a dwarf tomato and it takes up this space. So the idea is to make everything overridable, and you're just copying, you're using it as a template that then you customize. And
Dave, you are doing a great job. I can't imagine how many hours you have spent with this, but it's really, really nice, really useful. So
I think as we get those 4 parts in place, for me, the exciting thing will be then that's just like the theory of how you would use it. But then you want to actually make it productive, like applying the tools and seeing how it how people use the tool, or I think for me, that's the really interesting part, because I don't know. A lot of this is just thinking about data relationships, but then when you actually apply that in a practical sense, I'd love to see what comes out of that.
It's so mystic for me, the whole programming. So I'm just amazed how it's possible to do.
I think what's beautiful is that Andrea, Vivian, Rachel, you've seen how this, and all the people who've tested it from the start, you've seen how this has grown in a few months. And it's because of your feedback, it's because of noting all the things that you've been giving us that it's coming along this way. As you can see, there's so many adoptions from Notion, Andrea, and your own process of planning that's coming, into play here. So thank you so much, everybody here, Jeremy, especially Tanisha. Thanks for being here and sharing your feedback with us.
So yeah, if you find, so just to kind of reiterate again, if you have a chance, we have this perennials spreadsheet. We're collecting some of this data. I'm gonna start periodically importing that, maybe like a couple dozen a week type of things. But any information, any things you want to see in terms of plant data, then please update the perennials spreadsheet. And then on our website is a form for logging the numerous bugs that I'm sure you'll find. And it may be a little slow because the way I work on this is kind of in spurts to juggle with everything else that's going on. But if it's filled in the form, then we're definitely aware. It's on our radar. We're definitely aware that that issue is there. So that's the best way to kind of get our attention.
Thank you so much, Dave. And Nikki, of course. That was it.
Thank you again for being here. And so it's the top of the hour. And thank you for, if you have any feedback along the way, some people reach out to us with different things, like they say, I'm an editor, and when you get to the marketing part, I can help you out. And we're open at this point to bartering as well, not just Sage, but the different products that we have in GIY for the time that you take to debug it and plan out and attend these meetings to help it come to life. So thank you, and reach out to us if you have any questions.
Thanks so much.
All right, take
Thank you.
care.